This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design and development by three guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. We're recording this live on Wednesday afternoon in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 103, Wednesday, September 9th, 2015. Must-haves. Hey, guys.
What's going
Good
on?
afternoon. How you doing?
Doing very good. How about you, John Picozzi from Oomph? How are you this week?
I'm doing fabulous. Excited. Football season starting back up. I'm in two fantasy football leagues, which has very little to do with technology.
So you're going to be twice a loser this year.
Yeah, I'm basically just gonna ride the bench, bottom of the league in both my leagues. Although both week ones look like a win for me, so we'll see.
We know how that goes.
Yep, you're always riding high at the beginning of the season.
Right, exactly. Very optimistic, just like the football players. Also joining us is Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Design. Nick, do you have any fantasy football teams that you belong to, leagues?
Not anymore. I stopped a couple years ago because I know so little that even from the beginning my picks are kind of random, so it's less fun for other people in the league. So I kind of took a hiatus. But I did find out this year they're attaching RFID sensors to all the players so they can track position, speed, and impact force for all the players, which should be kind of interesting.
Attaching it where?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're avoiding helmets due to the whole concussion issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the NFL doesn't really want that information released. But I think
Yeah.
I don't know where exactly it is.
Interesting. Yeah. So I belong to two leagues too, and one league is with my family members. So my wife was the Super Bowl champion last year. So Nick, it doesn't matter how much you know about football.
Yeah, you also have to remember to set up your team.
Yeah, that's true.
Every week.
That's true. You have to remember to do it once a week. That's true.
And I'm usually good for the first few weeks and then drop off.
Then you drop off, and then you check in at the end of the season, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so this week we're talking about must-haves, which is an interesting topic because there are things that, when we start projects, the things we think you must have. Modules that we must have, tools that we must have. So we're going to go through a list of things that we pretty much use on all projects, and we've divided this into modules, development tools, and then some nice-to-have things at the end of this list. So let's just attack this list and get through them, and hopefully people are familiar with some of these things. And actually, really, I prefer that people are learning something today. So maybe there's some modules here that people aren't using, and that happened when we created this list a week ago. There were some things on this list that surprised us as well. So let's just go down. So for development tools, what are some must-haves? We have two on our list, and we may think of more if we go along, but there's two real obvious ones, and we don't need to even to go into a lot of details on these, but you must have
Drush is a big one. I remember when I first learned how to use Drush or how to install Drush. I think Steve and I were actually at Drupal camp out at UMass Amherst, and their tech guru over there was actually showing people how to install and configure Drush, and just some of the commands that you could use with it. And after that, I went home and started playing with it, and I was like, oh my god, this thing is amazing. You can do everything with this. And even to this day, I'm still amazed by different integrations and the amount that you can do with Drush. I actually work on a multi-site pretty regularly, and for multi-site development, it is awesome to be able to say, Drush at this site, do this command, and not have to worry about really even thinking about, oh, am I doing it right? Am I running things in the proper order? Drush just does everything for you. So definitely very, very helpful.
Yeah, Drush, I think one of the greatest things about Drush is that, even the more simple functions that it does saves you a ton of time, and you don't have to worry about every piece of it. You just add it as needed. So, for example, you can update modules or you can download new modules, but you can also do things like run migrations with it, install Drupal, or set up a temporary server, um, and it's extremely powerful.
So episode 4, talkingdrupal.com/004, one of the early shows we talk about Drush if you want some more details about Drush. So before we leave Drush, is there one particular thing that you guys find the most handy about it? I think one of the things for me is sometimes when things get screwed up, it's an easy way to disable a module. If you've got a module that's causing you some headache and you can't run a website, you can go to Drush and disable the module from the command line. I found that is something I've had to use a few times in the past.
Yeah, I think for me the two things, I mean, I use it all the time, but the two things that are similar to that for me are logging in on a brand new site. So if you're taking over a site from another developer, you don't need to necessarily get the passwords. You can just use Drush to generate a new one. And then if you've ever gotten yourself into the flood table in Drupal, Drush is the fastest way to clear out that flood table, and you'll be able to access your site again.
Good tips. All right, so the next thing we got on the list in development tools, another big obvious one, maybe a little less obvious because it's not Drupal specific, it's Git.
Yeah,
Good.
I was gonna say I couldn't live without Git or Drush these days. I know getting started it was a little bit rough trying to figure out what all the new practices were and all the different commands, but I can't even do a simple brochure site without using Git anymore. It's just so much easier to manage manage the process, manage what code is on there, what version is on there, and make sure that you're not overwriting something that shouldn't be overwritten.
Yeah, it's even useful for multiple developers doing multiple feature improvements. We've actually implemented a workflow where you're basically always branching off a master, making your changes, and then submitting back to master via pull requests. And that's really been very helpful because it's allowed us to review our code to make sure it's of the highest quality, but also um, get familiar with other people's coding styles and be able to say, hey, this could be done this way, which would be some sort of improvement, whether it's performance or readability or what have you. So it really helps with checks and balances and prevents people from making the mistake of, oh, I just overwrote that, or oh, I just did this stupid thing that I shouldn't have. It's also a little bit of a safety net too, because if you do a deployment or you commit something and it breaks, you can roll back to a previous version that was working fairly easily. So I think Git is definitely important.
So episode 37, talkingdrupal.com/037, we talk about Git. So it'd be interesting at some point to go back to some of these earlier shows, listen to them, and maybe create a fresher version based on some of our knowledge a couple of years later. So let's move on to some modules. So the first one we've got here is module filter. So these are, let's hit the modules first that we use in the development environment for development. And actually, I think that's what all of these are now I'm looking at the list. They're things that help you on the dev side. So the first one's module filter.
Yeah, module filter is basically just a UI improvement for the module screen that allows you to search by module name or filter down by new or just added modules. So that way you can quickly find modules easier. It also gives you some UI to be able to see what modules you're disabling and enabling, and a very easy way to do that. The module screen in Drupal right now, people that have been around Drupal for a while know, or even if you don't, you know that scrolling, you can scroll forever if you have a lot of modules installed on your site. And this module gives you the ability to be able to have a different interface there. Module filter, again, gives you a search box, so you don't have to scroll all the way down the page. You can type in views, and all the modules that contain views will pop up. And, it's very useful, very helpful.
It's a time saver, really.
Yeah, it's a huge time saver. I think the two biggest UI improvements are getting rid of the separation between the types of modules and just making them alphabetic, and then that search block just working, with Ajax. There's a lot of other, progressive enhancements, things that help out, but those are the two biggest. Not having to know which, if you're looking for a particular module, searching with the old interface, you'd have to know either which section it is in. If you were trying to search for something like CTools that's required by, every other module on the planet, then you're going to get, tons of false positive results. So it's a huge improvement.
So related to that is the next one we have on the list, which is fast permissions. It really brings the same kind of thing to the permissions page.
Yeah, that's again, that's one of the cool ones. They just released a new update recently that also gives you an extra checkbox at the beginning. So if you're trying to give a permission to multiple roles or every role, you can just check that, and it checks every box. Makes it a lot easier. And then it has color enhancements to show you which ones have been checked or unchecked. So if you uncheck a box, it gets a little red glow around it, so you know that it was checked when you first loaded the page. And if you check something new, it's got a green glow. So again, it also makes filtering by modules a lot easier in roles. But it's,
so as we're going through these development modules, do you guys turn these off on a production site, or do you leave them on?
For module filter, I usually leave it on. It's probably say the same thing for fast permissions as well. Just because they're enhancing the admin UI, they're not really being loaded on the front end of the site. Could it slow down a user's content editing capability? Sure, but I don't really think it's noticeable.
Yeah, I depends on the module. Some of them I turn on, some of them I turn off. These two, the first few I generally leave on throughout the website's life.
Okay, the next one we've got is, it's written here as admin views, but I think it's called administration views, isn't it? Or is it just admin views? I'm going to look it up right now.
Yeah, I'm looking. Checking. I don't recall, actually. Well, the short name is admin views, and the actual name of the module is administration views.
Right, yeah.
This is a great little module that I found probably 6 or 8 months ago. What it does is it generally overhauls the main content overview pages. It also overhauls the user page. There's a couple others. It creates views for them. I think the single biggest improvement for this module is, it's one of my pet peeves in Drupal core. The content overview page, you can filter, by default you can filter by content type, but if you filter by content type A and then you need to now filter by content type B, you have to, in default Drupal, you have to hit reset. You can't just like choose a new content type and tell it to refilter. This module replaces that, so you can just reset. You can just choose the other content type you need to filter by and refilter it, and it works. So it takes a whole page load and a whole step out of the process. It also, because...
So I want to make sure we're clear, and I think you said this, but I want to make sure we're clear. So like the people's page, if you go to like the people's page in Drupal,
yep,
there's nothing you can do with that unless you install this module, and it turns that page into a view, and you can do whatever you want with it at that point. So you can add
Yes.
any filters you want to add to the people's view. You can, I think by default it adds bulk operations as well.
Yep.
Right. So it turns some of those basic maintenance tools, maintenance pages, into views that you now have complete control over and can customize them any way you want. This is incredibly powerful because I used to build these views by myself.
Yeah. And it integrates not just with users and nodes. I believe there are other, I think it works with taxonomy sometimes. I think it also works with, I don't recall, there's a couple of helper modules too that it works with, like organic groups I think it can do some stuff with. But there's 4 or 5 things. If you enable a module, admin views already has, something overriding that just to make it easier.
Okay, John, anything to add before we run forward?
No, I've actually never used admin views, so I'm
Really?
interested to drop it on a site and play around with it.
You should check it out. It's the only drawback I've seen with it is that it requires views bulk operations, which sometimes you don't need. So it's requiring a whole nother module
Right.
that sometimes I'd be more than happy not having. But it's
Right.
pretty cool.
Let's see. So, just an example, just to hit on it a little more. Just a great example of it is, let's say you've added some fields to the user account, and an admin wants to be able to find a user based on any of those fields. You're not gonna be able to do that unless you build something yourself to do that. So this gives you the ability to do that easily.
Just out of curiosity, if you guys have used it, does it hijack the current user page, or is it like an additional page that you would have to add to your menu?
No, it takes it
Hijack.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, hijack it. Hijack it sounds so evil.
It replaces.
It replaces it.
Oh, reply. Sorry, I mean
No, it's the same thing, but it's kind of funny how you word it. Hijacks it. Right?
tomatoes.
I guess, but in this computing world, the word hijack certainly has a black connotation to it, doesn't it? So let's jump to the next one. Backup and migrate. Really, you need to back up?
Admin menus is the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over one. Sorry, admin menus.
That's okay. Admin menus is great. So it basically my entry level knowledge of it is basically creates a drop down menu for you from your administration toolbar. This is great if you have multiple things, which you do in the admin toolbar, multiple nested items. It gives you the ability to see everything in your menu without having to go through the different Drupal admin pages and click each disparate item. Great place where I've used this most recently is doing translation on a site. The translation menu is under configuration, under language or regional settings. And then within there, you can have different options. I actually happen to be using Lingotech, so they have a Lingotech tab with subtabs. So getting down to that 5th level of navigation would take quite a few page loads. With admin menu, I can just kind of go through the drop-down menus and get where I need to go in one fell swoop.
Yeah, admin menu saves you about 14 million clicks per website. Just not having to click structure, content types, content type, manage fields, and then the field, saves you 5 clicks every single time. I nearly can't work on a site if it doesn't have it. There's 2 really big drawbacks though with admin menu. One is about every other release of either Drupal or admin menu, there's some messed up thing with the cache where it will disappear until you clear cache. And there's a couple of modules and versions of jQuery that it doesn't work with. vast majority of the cases, though, it works flawlessly, and those issues are usually fixed pretty quickly. But it's easily one of those modules where it's so useful and so jarring sometimes to use a site that doesn't have it that I'll spend an hour or two debugging why it's disappearing and fix it,
Right.
and then post that back.
I actually saw a bug for admin menus where there was some CSS style that was preventing you from getting to the second level of items. Like you'd be, I guess it'd be the third level of items. So you could get to your second level, and then when you went to the third level, you couldn't get there. You couldn't click on it. And I subscribed to it because I was like, oh, this is a problem. And there was a patch developed, and I implemented the patch, and it worked great. But it was interesting to see like how much back and forth there was on this ticket about this just like one CSS entry as to whether that was the best way to do it. And we're kind of going down the rabbit hole here, but I just thought it was interesting. That one little CSS entry, there was like a 50 to 100 comment thread on. Seems kind of crazy, but the development around it, my point here is the development around it is very active, and they're very quick to jump on these things and fix them the best way humanly possible.
All right, so let's jump on to the next one. Backup and migrate. A necessary tool, right? So backup and migrate is a module that you install, and it backs up your database code or database only and code only, but it's a great backup tool. So if you check out Talking Drupal episode 47, so talkingdrupal.com/047, we talk about backups that day, and we do get into backup and migrate a little bit.
This show should be subtitled "Shameless Self-Promotion."
No, it's more of giving. It's the index show, index back to previous episodes.
So backup and migrate is a great tool for just that, backing stuff up. Allows you to back up to a bunch of different services and sources. There are people who have been doing it to most famously Node Squirrel, but Dropbox, Google Drive, all sorts of stuff. I think Amazon S3 is in there. I'm interested to see how many sites you guys use this on, if you use it on all your sites, but also if you keep it enabled on production sites.
Great question. So my answer is we don't use it for production backups. We use it more. We usually leave it disabled on the production site and flip it on if we want to create a copy of the production database to move it over to our development environment. But I do have customers that are using it for production and I say that because we host most of our sites and we're backing up through another means. If I'm at a third-party hosting provider, most of my customers are, if they're in that scenario, they're using backup and migrate to a third-party service because it has scheduling in it, which I'm not sure you mentioned, John, which was, you can set up to say, hey, I want to back this up every day, and I want to go to this. This is the kind of things I want to back up, and I want it to go to this location. So, like, I have one customer who has it running for two different scenarios, which is they run the backup of the database to one place, and then they back up files, so the physical images, because they have a whole lot of them, they back that up to a different place. So I think Node Squirrel is taking the database, and then Amazon S3 is taking the files for the website.
I think backing up the files is an add-on module, though. I don't think backup migrate by default does that. And to answer your question as well, for myself, a fair amount of my websites use it, but it's typically there's another backup solution as well. I'll leave it on and usually save a week's worth of backups just so that there's a local copy of the database in case something goes haywire. But then there's also offsite backups. So if the server dies, there's a way to get it back.
So I mean, ultimately, it is kind of a layman's relatively cheap backup solution, within Drupal. The only reason I ask is I know a lot of hosting providers, a lot of Drupal hosting providers that are also doing daily and weekly backups on their own, recommend that you don't have that installed on your production environment due to performance
Yeah, it's a
issues.
resource hog, sure.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the reason I ask. I mean, I think it's a great tool. If you don't have direct access to your MySQL database, to get a copy of your site. And going back probably about 15 minutes now, the file backup is not a bad idea as well. But again, you should be using Git, so you have versioned backup of all your files. Granted, there may be some directories that are excluded from that, but
Images wouldn't typically be in there.
all in all, yeah, the files directory wouldn't be in there. But all in all, I think I think backup and migrate's a pretty good solution.
Yeah,
I think, go ahead, Nick.
it's not compatible with Aqua either. So if you're hosting Aqua, you need to have another solution in place anyway.
It's a good solution if you're not backing anything up. And in terms of performance, if you could get it to work, like that it backs up in the middle of the night when you aren't using maybe a lot of your resources, it's probably a good thing to do. It's way better than nothing. Let's see. Where are we on this list? We're down to
Reroute email.
Sorry for the delay there. Yeah. So reroute email is a necessary module for those who have a copy of a live website and you're doing some work on it, and that website sends out emails. Like, let's say you're doing an e-commerce system and you're testing, or you got automated emails that come out of your website and you just want them to route somewhere else, like in a dev environment. It's a great module. You just install it, enable it, and say any email that comes out of this website, have everything go to this address, and any email coming out of your system will go to that address. That's getting generated from any other module. It's a great little tool to prevent you from making huge mistakes.
Yeah,
Like,
it can
sending
really be a
emails to
lifesaver.
customers from a dev site is not cool.
Yeah, it's sending 20,000 emails to people. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Right.
And it's super easy to set up. It takes 5 minutes to configure. You can easily send the emails to your account or just a dead-end account if you just want them to not go anywhere. And it's extremely simple.
Okay, so like that module falls into like a list of modules in my head that are like protect yourself in a dev environment kind of thing, and that's one of them that I always install for that. The next one is in that same category, which is Shield. So Shield, I think, Nick, is one that I learned about from you at some point in time.
Yep. Yeah, PHP Authentication Shield, again, it's one of those quick modules to install. What it does is it sets up a HTTP or htaccess authentication password. So the little pop-up you get when you visit a site sometimes saying you need a username and password to access the site. It's extremely useful for two reasons. One, you can restrict access to the general public. You don't want them to be able to see the website yet, but you want your client to be able to see it. And the second thing, which I think is as important, is it blocks access to robots and crawlers and search engines. So that way your dev environment doesn't get indexed before the site's ready to go live.
Yeah, it's something that I actually just used the other day on a site that we're getting ready to launch. It works great. You jump in there and you set a username and password, and then save the configuration. One little bit of a hinky thing, you have to just be aware that the message that they default to actually has the username and password in it. So if you're really trying to keep people out, you definitely want to change that message so it doesn't give away your secrets. But
you can do that right in the configuration screen. So
yep, right in the configuration screen, there's a field for that. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it also lets you differentiate between command line and non-command line. So if you're using Drush, you can have it not blocked by Drush. So if which I can't really imagine a scenario where you'd want it blocked by you'd want to block it, but it gives you that option.
Where you do run into issues with it that I've seen is if you're, let's say, working with something like MailChimp and you set up their callback interface where if someone updates a MailChimp account in MailChimp, it calls back to your website and updates their account profile on your website. That kind of stuff doesn't work when that shield is on. So you gotta.
You can actually, certain callbacks, and I'm assuming MailChimp allows you to, but you can actually add that the username and password into the callback string, so that it will pass through that password.
It does pass through Shield.
I haven't tried it with Shield, but I've tried it with a regular htaccess password, and it's with another service, not MailChimp, but it has worked.
Okay.
Yeah, I can show you how to do that. Because you can also do like a module that we should talk about that isn't on the list, stage file proxy. You can set that up as well with authentication.
One thing I want to go back up the list one second to reroute email. I've actually never heard of reroute email. We usually use mail redirect, which is basically the ability to, I think it's probably pretty similar to reroute email, but it basically takes all system emails, anything that Drupal would send out, and sends them to one email address that you put in the field, and it drops all of the emails to that address. So I wanted to add that as another option if you didn't want to use the reroute email module.
All right, so let's move on to the one we just added, stage file proxy, another lifesaver. I'm not sure how we missed this in our preparation for the show, actually.
Yeah, so stage file proxy is a module that lets you point your development environment at the live site and it will pull down images as needed. So usually the longest part in setting up a dev environment to debug things is getting the files. So you can use Git to get the code, it's very quick. You can use Backup and Migrate to get the database. Unless it's a very large database, it will take less than 2 or 3 minutes. But then downloading thousands of files and copying them over gets messy. With stage file proxy, you don't need to worry about that. On your dev environment, you set it up, you point at the live site, and then internally, when an image is requested, Drupal will check and see if that resource exists. If it does, it serves it. If it doesn't, it goes to the live site, grabs it, copies it. So you're only copying the individual files that you're looking at. It's incredibly useful, very easy to set up, and it does work with htaccess.
Nick, we're losing you. You need to reset your mic. Going into Mac world. You must be on your Mac today with a USB mic. So it means every 45 minutes you need to unplug it and plug it back in.
Okay.
So if you could go ahead and do that because we can't understand you. All right. So the next one we have on our list is.
I was just talking to myself because I didn't realize I was muted. I was just saying a USB mic is very interesting to me. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah, the Mac. So Nick is a new Mac owner, and there's a number of USB mics, if not all of them, that have trouble with Macs. I don't know what it is. That like at 45, 50-minute mark, it just goes into. So you sound like a robot, and if you unplug it and plug it back in, it usually just goes away right away. Don't know what it's caused by, but it's been like that for years, as long as I can remember. It's not a very technical solution or description of the problem, but that's what it is.
Is this any better?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, very weird.
Yeah.
I do need to buy a new headset anyway. At some point in the last 3 or 4 weeks, somehow my USB connector got bent, and it's not working with several other devices, which is why I'm on the Mac in the first place.
So let's talk about Devel.
So Devel is one of those modules that, unless you're writing your own code, probably isn't incredibly useful. But once you get past that hurdle and that that kind of learning curve is indispensable. Um, Devel allows you to do many different things, lets you see execution time, slow queries, lets you create and generate content, but probably the most useful piece is it allows you to see the data structures on your site, whether that's the user content, but allows you to see, how the data is structured so that you can interact with it and perform functions on it.
Yeah, and Devel is one of those modules that you do not want to leave turned on in a production environment. That is very much just a development tool. You want to be sure to shut that off. It's one of those, slap forehead moments when we go to a site that we've inherited from somebody else and we look at the module list and Devel's turned on and there are a couple sub modules installed and turned on. And you're always just like, oh man, no wonder this thing's performing slowly or doing that thing that it's not supposed to. So Devel's definitely one of those things you want to make sure you shut off in production.
It's an easy thing to leave on to, especially if you're trying to debug something. So you've worked on a site, it's out there and it's live, and the customer's calling with an issue, and you want to see what's going on. So you flip on Devel to look at the structures, look at your code, and then you forget to turn it back off. So it's one of those modules where if you use it, it's easy to leave it on in production, especially in those scenarios where you're trying to chase something down. It's almost like I'd love to have a timer on it that says, if this, after 12 hours, this module will automatically get shut off. Hey, there's an idea for a module, huh?
Or, you could easily write a cron job that does that.
Right.
Every 12 hours runs dist-devel, which could cause its own round of confusing, like, we've got this issue where modules randomly disable at midnight and noon. What's going on? But yeah, it's an incredibly useful module. And there's a couple of helper modules that I don't use too often, but the one I probably use the most is Devel Themer. Devel Themer is really useful in that it gives you the ability to determine what you can name a template file in order to get it loaded. So if you're trying to override a template for a field, you can turn on Devel Themer, click on the output of the field, and it will say you could use node.tpl, or you could use node -- content type and it shows you the whole nest so that you can determine which template file will target it at the appropriate level. And then I usually just shut it off. But whenever you're trying to find out how to override a template and you can't find out what to name it, Devel Themer is the way to go.
All right, so let's move on to our next category of must-haves, which is the nice-to-have category. So these are things that we use sometimes in projects. And let's start with bundle copy.
So I actually have used that once or twice. I don't use it too often. There's one a little bit further down the list I prefer. So I think you use it the most, Stephen. So it might be better if you give a little synopsis.
Sure. Well, start with the one that you use more often.
So the one that I use is called Field Tools. Field Tools allows you to copy a content type to another content type. So there's an interface where you can say, I want to create a new content type and copy this set of fields. So if you have a content type that has, say, 25 fields, you need another content type that has, 15 of those fields. Your option used to be, just creating that content type. With Field Tools, you can say, copy this content type, take these 15 fields over, don't take these. But you can mix and match. So you can say, take these 3 fields from this content type, these 5 fields from this one, and create it. And it will programmatically create that content type, and then you can make any overrides that you need to make. But it's, very, very easy interface to use. It's not very often, like you said, these are nice to haves. It's not very often you need this. But I had a website recently that had 3 content types that were fairly close, but had about 45 fields on each, so it would have taken me, an hour and a half to copy them all. With field tools, it took me less than 5 minutes.
So Nick, there's a crossover here because bundle copy does some of that same functionality.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I think. But I prefer field tools. That's why it's probably better for you to talk about bundle copy.
Yeah, well, yeah. So everything Nick just said, yes, same for bundle copy. I didn't notice that both of these were on the list, but bundle copy does the same kind of thing and allows you from a development side to easily get two what in Drupal would be called bundles. You can copy a bundle and a piece of a bundle, so you could really say, hey, I'm going to take this content type, take these two fields, and from this content type, and I want to copy them, export them here, and import them there. So we're really sort of talking about the same kind of thing.
Yeah, so bundle copy, if I recall, last time I looked at it, it's kind of like the views export, where you actually have to export and then import it, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, field tools, just there's an interface, so you just push the button.
Right.
There's no export process, but
yeah, but if you work in between two different physical sites,
yeah, you can't use field tools for that.
Yeah. So like I've got if I'm going from a development environment to a production environment, since I'm not using necessarily a feature to do something, and I don't have Drupal 8 running where I can do some clever moving of field types there. I can say take these two fields from website A and move them to website B. It works great. It's a great time saver if you're trying to get a production site or a QA site up and running quickly. I am looking at the bundle copy page. It says looks like they got some Drupal 8 stuff. I'm not sure why you would need this in Drupal 8, but maybe it's doing something more. But it looks like Drupal 8 is underway. All right, so bundle copy. Let's go on to the next one here. Coffee.
Everybody needs coffee. I love coffee. Coffee is not or at least in the Drupal sense, it's not a drink that you enjoy if you're me any time of the day, but most people in the morning. It's actually a nifty searching tool. So this might even go into the previous section of must-haves, but it is a nice to have in the aspect that it's not going to be crucial to your development process. Similarly to admin menu and helping you see everything that is available to you from a menu standpoint, Coffee does the same thing. So if you're a Mac user, you're probably familiar with the Spotlight search that you can get by hitting Command Shift. Right, pops up in the middle of the screen. You start typing stuff, and it basically searches your whole computer for that term. Well, Coffee is basically Spotlight search for your Drupal site. If you hit, I believe it's Option D with Coffee installed, a box will pop up over your Drupal site, and if you start typing something like, I don't know, views, it will pull all of the paths that have views in them and show you all of the views configuration pages and various things to do with views. So it's a very nifty tool to easily get around your site and get to different configuration pages without having to actually trudge through the menu. Most of the time I use this when I install a module that I've never used before, I'm not overly familiar with, to figure out where the configuration page is. So you install the module, you say, you open up Coffee and you say, new module, whatever the new module name is, and it pops up with, hey, here are all the configuration pages for that module. And you can say, oh, okay, so now I know it's under the configuration languages, so on and so forth, path. That way I can find it again later on. Very helpful. I recommend it highly.
Yeah, that's the one on this list that I've never used. Or maybe it was there on a site I've been on but didn't know it, right? Because I didn't hit Command D or whatever that keystroke is.
Yeah, so a lot of times you may not even know it's there. There's no really visible way to tell other than to see if it's installed or to hit Option D. But it is helpful and sometimes can be lurking in the corners.
Okay. John, is that something you would typically uninstall in production or just leave it there?
No, I use it on all sites because even in production, it's really helpful um, to just get somewhere quickly. If you need to do something quickly, change somebody's permissions or view the status report page, you can just log in, hit Option D, and type in status report and go off to the status report page. So it does let you get places very quickly.
So it doesn't add extra page load time by having that extra listener, or I mean, I would
I
think
mean,
that would slow
yeah,
down
I
page
guess it,
loads.
I guess it, I guess it does slow down page loads, but again, it's an admin tool, so it's not like it's loading it for the average user. So I mean, if you're really concerned about your admin page loads, then yeah, this is probably not something that you want kind of hanging around on every page. But
All right, so the next one we've got is logging and alerts. I add this one, or did someone else add this one? I can't remember.
I think you added this one.
Yeah, so this module, when you install it, it probably does more than I use it for, but it gives you the ability to set up email alerts based on logs. So you could say anytime there's a warning or an error message that's logged, I'd like to get an email for it. So it shows up in your email box as a way to alert you. I found it very handy for that exact situation. Just, hey, email me every time there's an error on this website.
Do you end up getting spammed with responses, or is it just
No.
every once in a while?
Oh, yeah, I don't have a lot of errors.
Okay.
But it's a good way to sort of force you to mitigate errors. Yeah, I don't find myself spammed. I find myself being alerted of errors
Okay.
that are going on. Yeah, so it's a handy module to have. Unless you prefer to ignore the log file. So if you want to ignore the log file, don't turn this on.
Well, that's probably not a good idea anyway.
Right.
Does it work
Okay.
with syslog? I imagine it works with syslog as
It
well,
does. Yeah, it does.
since it's doing
It's
the
hooked in the middle. Yeah,
watchdog. Okay.
exactly. Yep. So if you go into syslog, it works just as well.
Very cool.
All right. So let's see. The next one on our list is Mandrill,
Mandrill.
which kind of feels like an odd one in the middle of all these modules we've talked about, right?
Yeah, but it can very quickly go from nice to have to must have though. I mean, when your site revolves around sending large volumes of email, you will kill the performance of your server unless you're using some other service to send those emails, or you have a very high risk of becoming blacklisted. Um, so Mandrill is, a tie-in. Mandrill, for those that don't know, is kind of what the backend, what powers MailChimp, and MailChimp provides access to that API to allow you to send bulk emails. So it allows you to send upwards of thousands to millions of emails a month, and take some of that load out of your Drupal site, while still giving you the ability to customize them and set up templates and use the MailChimp general interface. It's very powerful.
It's a pretty quick way to replace the outbound mail SMTP server or whatever with a really reliable, high performance sort of way to get emails out the door.
so this isn't the best. I wouldn't say this is the best use for it, but I actually recently used Mandrill for a site that was not sending a whole ton of email. Somehow the server had gotten blacklisted by Google, so they were having issues receiving emails from their website. And within like maybe an hour, I was able to have Mandrill up and running, and their email services returned back to normal just by installing a couple modules and using Mandrill as the sending service. So Mandrill is definitely very, very cool, and I wish I had more reason to use it more.
Yeah, and the first 12,000 emails I think are free. So unless there's no reason not to use it if you're even low volume. It prevents you from getting blacklisted, and it's free for low volume.
And some of the benefits of using it even in low volume is that you can go into into the Mandrill interface, look back at the emails, and you can turn on things like open rates and click rates, so you can get a sense of how many people are actually looking at the emails. And your bounce backs, you can manage them sort of all from one place, so you can find out how many bad email addresses you have in your database. So it's a great tool, and even if you go over the 12,000, and is that the number? Is it 12,000 free?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So even if you go over that, it's not expensive beyond that. It's low. It's a low amount of money for an additional 1,000 after that.
Yeah.
What those numbers are, I'm not sure, but it's not very expensive.
Yeah, and
And
send you a
it's super easy to set up.
Yeah, they send you a nice email too, weekly, to kind of go over your weekly send and bounces and all that stuff. I heard you mention bounce rate. I don't know if you mentioned the email, so
No.
you can actually see, like, oh, I sent 6 emails this week, and then, oh, I sent 7. You're not sending a ton of emails, but it's good to kind of be able to keep track of it.
So if you want to learn more about Mandrill, we have 3 episodes you could listen to. We have episode 23 of Talking Drupal, so talkingdrupal.com/023. The title that day was email. Then there was another one on MailChimp, which was episode 073. And then we had another episode on HTML email. We talked about Mandrill there as well on 057. So we're fans of Mandrill, clearly.
Clearly.
Very much.
And we forgot to mention they do have a templating system. So you could actually use Mandrill and use a templating system, so you send in tokens from your Drupal site, and then you completely format the email from the Mandrill side. Okay, so we're out of our category of nice-to-haves, and we have one thing sitting in themes. That is Shiny. Nick, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so Shiny is a much nicer replacement over 7. It's an admin theme. It's a little bit more stylized, but still very clean. I just find it's much more aesthetically pleasing. I mean, 7 is very good in that everything works there.
It's responsive though, Shiny, right?
Yeah, Shiny's responsive. So it's a pretty nice improvement over 7. Just download it, install it, and be good to go. And set it up as the default admin theme. It's one of the first things that I install when I'm installing, building a new site from scratch.
And what do you do for admin theme? Stick with 7?
Yeah, pretty much. We're using a different admin theme for a project we're working on right now, and I'm not really in love with it. I've never used Shiny. I should check it out. But yeah, usually we stick with 7.
Okay. Yeah, I've done 7 and Shiny myself. So one other. This isn't even in a category of nice to have or must have, but I guess it falls somewhere in there. Is a Drupal.org account. Every Drupal developer should have a Drupal.org account.
It is true.
So
working on Drupal,
go set it up if you don't have one. And let's go on the complete opposite side here of the things to uninstall. So we've had our must-haves, nice-to-haves, and now what things do we actually uninstall when we set up Drupal?
So I'm kind of curious to hear what you guys do, because I think I wrote most of these down, and people are sometimes surprised when I say I get rid of these, except for 1 or 2 of them. But I'm fairly, I remove a bunch of stuff.
I only usually, unless there's a requirement, get rid of 2 of them.
Yeah, so let's go over them still first, okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
So yeah, I'll just go through the whole list. The modules that I disable and uninstall from core Drupal are dashboard, database login.
But why and why? So dashboard and why?
So I removed dashboard, and the reason why is because I've never. I think I've used it on one website ever. If I'm setting up a dashboard for a site, I'm usually customizing it and creating it from scratch anyway, so it's just some overhead. Database logging, although to be honest, this is only right before launch. I just right before launch, I disable database logging and enable syslog. That's because database logging is a huge performance drain, especially if there's a lot of notices or errors or traffic.
Hmm.
Um, I remove comment unless there's a specific call for it. In 7 years of doing Drupal, I think one or two websites have used comment. They're either if somebody needs comments and content, usually people are looking at something like Disqus, Facebook, or even just a custom entity. The comment module really doesn't get a lot of use for my clients. I removed the color module. Color, if you recall, allows you to change the colors in Bartik. Unless you're using Bartik, I think there's one or two other themes that actually use color, so it's almost never used. So I just get rid of it. Um, toolbar I get rid of because we're now using one of the modules we mentioned above, admin menu. There's an admin menu toolbar style module, and if you leave toolbar enabled, then it gives you a double toolbar, which is not useful. I remove overlay because I just am not a fan of it. Makes the page load slower. Um, it's an overlay. It's just a terrible UI, terrible experience. I really don't like the overlay module. So get rid of that. And then finally, shortcut. And I get rid of shortcut for much of the same reason that I get rid of dashboard. Shortcut is useful if you on those sites where the admin menu doesn't work. Shortcut is useful because you can create shortcuts to the pages that you would need to. So, for example, if you need to have it, a common one that I'll make on those sites is like to the performance cache clear. Because that's one of the things we didn't mention either. The admin menu toolbar module gives you the ability to clear cache, run cron, straight from the home dropdown. And you can't do that if admin menu doesn't exist. The other reason is if you're using admin menu, shortcut doesn't work with it. It's not compatible, so I just get rid of it. So, I mean, that's the list. I'll run through it really, really quickly again, but it's dashboard, database logging, comment, color, toolbar, overlay, and shortcut. And it's important to get rid of modules that you're not using because on page loads, when it bootstraps, Drupal loads all the modules to see what belongs in the list. And having modules installed, even if you never use them, just adds an extra entry. Doesn't add a ton of overhead, but it's something. How about you guys?
So the ones on the list for me, I never disabled dashboard. Never even considered it. My dashboard is used. I think customers use dashboard, but database logging, yes. I don't ever install admin menu, so I keep toolbar. Overlay I have disabled on a number of sites, but I think that's kind of it. And shortcut would stay there because I generally don't use admin menu. But those are the only ones there that I go out of my way to disable.
So I guess my previous comment was untrue because I guess I disable 3 of them.
Yeah.
Because I do use admin menu, so toolbar is not necessary. And then color and comment are usually the other two that go for me. Everything else usually stays.
So you use overlay?
I do use overlay. I find overlay extremely useful, but I can see how people would think it or feel that it wouldn't be.
How is it useful for you? What aspect of that monstrosity is useful for you?
Just what it does. It overlays the content. It makes it easy to get back and forth from pages. I don't know. I don't know. I find it useful.
I am. We are polar opposites on that module.
That monstrosity. I would like that. That's a quote of the show right there.
Yeah. So those are the lists that I get rid of. It's interesting to hear you guys take. I would think if you're using admin menu, you should really consider getting rid of shortcut as well, because it's not compatible. Or at least I've never found a way to get shortcuts to work with admin menu. And the other modules, if they're not being used, it might be worth looking at as well.
Okay, so we've gone through our list. Is there anything else we can think to add to this before we close out today's show? Any other last-minute additions to the must-haves?
Nope.
I'll take that as a no. Okay, great. So that puts a wrap to 103. John Picozzi from Oomph. What's going on? Anything you want to talk about before we close out today?
Oh man, next week on Tuesday, Drupal PVD is happening in Providence, Rhode Island. So if you're in the Providence area and you want to stop on by, come on. There'll be food and drinks, and we'll talk about some really cool Drupal stuff. I think Steve's actually going to talk about. What is Steve going to talk about? He's going to talk about text message integration, which I am very interested in hearing about.
Good. I'm glad I'm going to talk about it. I got a few little demos to show you, so that'll be fun.
Ooh, he's doing the live demo.
Yes. One of the cool implementations of a text messaging system is if when you have an e-commerce site, is that whenever an order is completed, you could send the owner of that website a little cha-ching text message with the order amount.
That's interesting.
That's a great use of it. How about you, Nick? John, where can people find you online? Sorry.
People can find me on all the social media at John Picozzi, and always on at oomfinc.com.
Great. So is your email always on at oomfinc.com?
No, but okay. I'm gonna work on that for next week.
Okay. All right. How about you, Nick?
You can find me online at NicksFan pretty much everywhere. I just started a new Instagram account, so if people want to follow me there, I won't complain. And you'll see me tonight at the Boston PHP meetup, and most likely next week at the Providence Drupal meetup.
Awesome. So I want to remind people that the New England Drupal camp, which all three of us are a part of putting together, is going to be on October 10th at Brown University, and you can learn more and sign up to attend. The sessions are closed, so you cannot submit a session, but you certainly can sponsor it. So you can go to nedcamp, nedcamp.org, and visit us there, and then come take a trip to Providence on Columbus Day weekend and enjoy the fall season in New England and get a little Drupal in. So I'm Stephen Cross. You can find me at Stephen Cross with a PH on Twitter or at my company website, parallaxinfotech.com. And I think that's a wrap, guys, right?
Sounds good to me.
See you guys
See you next week.
weeks.
Bye.